So let's talk about your new book, Joe. It's called Saving Freedom, which is about President Harry Truman, who, like Biden, faced a world in crisis when he entered the White House. Truman may have had the toughest transition until this one, given that FDR died in office and left him with World War II and the spreading Soviet communism threat to tackle. So what tips should Biden take from Truman when it comes to confronting the crisis we face today?
Well, and I think Joe Biden's already starting to do it. Surround yourself with the best and the brightest people you can. Harry Truman had George Marshall, who was an organizer of the Allies' victory in World War II. He had Dean Acheson, perhaps the greatest diplomat of the 20th century, who really was the architect of Truman's foreign policy, which we still all basically live under today. He had Averell Harriman as his ambassador to the Soviet Union, and he listened to experts. He was constantly learning. He's a guy who graduated from Spalding Commercial College in Kansas City. That was the highest degree he ever attained. But he was learning throughout his entire life. He was reading throughout his entire life. And most importantly, he understood the Senate. He knew how to work the Senate. He had to work. Republicans took control of the Senate and the House for the first time in 14 years when Truman had to move on the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan and NATO. So he just worked with Republicans. He found Republicans who would work with him, and they created a partnership that moved us away from isolationism and created a world stage that really not only restrained the Soviet Union and pushed back Stalin and Soviet communism and kept it out of Europe, but also really helped create the American century and helped us thrive for decades.
Joe, you point out in the book, Truman has always been underestimated. He was underestimated by the public, by his party, and even by his own mother-in-law. So tell us, as you wrote this book, did he ever win her over? And by the way, how did you do with yours?
Yeah.
Pretty good. Martha loves him.
She said nice things about the book, so that's good. No, she's wonderful. But no, you know, Harry Truman was always underestimated from the very beginning when he got elected to the United States Senate in a shocking upset. He was dismissed by the New York Times as a rube. 6 years later, FDR wouldn't even endorse him. When he got selected as vice president, he was mocked as a second Missouri Compromise. Time magazine called him a mousy little man from Missouri. And of course, there are the famous sayings, to err is Truman, and I'm just mild about Harry, that followed him throughout the presidency. And when he left with a 22% approval rating. But he left with a 22% approval rating because he took one courageous move after another, whether you're talking about desegregating the armed forces or whether you're talking about confronting Stalin when America was just absolutely exhausted from 4 years of war. He also was a very patient man. He knew who he was. He wasn't upset by the fact that his mother-in-law told him early on that she did not approve of him. He was not good enough for best. He even let her live in the White House. And she still was telling him when he was in the White House that he wasn't a suitable replacement for FDR. And yet he kept his head down. He loved her. And when he left office with his 22% approval rating, a lot of Americans thought he was a failure as a president. Of course, decades later, historians would reassess that view and say he was a great president. But Winston Churchill, of all people, said when Truman left office, he said, more than anybody else, Harry Truman saved Western civilization. So he didn't have his mother-in-law on his side, but Winston Churchill thought he'd done a pretty darn good job.
And I got to say, Joe, you know, history will always tell us what we thought we knew. We always find out history has the 411 on everybody. This new book is wonderful, Saving Freedom, Truman, the Cold War, and the Fight for Western Civilization. It's available at all fine booksellers. Pick it up. It's really inspiring.